recording. So major point is we will start with a small revision of beer. So as we all know that this is an alcoholic beverage, and this semester you all going to be like we will be studying the alcoholic beverages, right? So alcoholic beverages are those that produce like with a chemical reaction of sugar by adding yeast, right? We need to have a sugar contained liquid, and what we need to add as yeast, let it go for a fermentation process. Then what will be like the thing we'll get as would be the alcohol, right? And can anyone tell me which type of alcohol we used to produce to consume? As we have already studied that there are two types of
Sir,
yes,
ethyl alcohol.
ethyl alcohol. Yes, correct. And methyl, like actually we must know about this thing also, that there are two types of alcohol. One is methyl alcohol and another one is ethyl. So to consume, the best one is ethyl, and the methyl alcohol is something which is used to be uh, sent to or prepared for the chemical or the factories kind of these things, right? Now we will talk about beer. So beer is also something which is known as alcoholic beverage, and it is fermented, brewed and fermented. So I hope there is no confusion in this particular part. Beer is brewed and fermented. Brewing is a process. If we do not have the direct sugar in our content, in our base ingredient. So the base ingredient for beer is barley, and barley, if we eat barley, the raw barley, then we will not taste the sugar content or a sweetened taste, right? So to get the sweetened taste, we need to undergo the brewing process. So brewing process is what? We need to soak the barley for 1 or 2 or 3 days so that the starch can be converted into sugar. Then only our yeast can react upon, right? So beer is brewing and fermented drink. So the major ingredient that we require, malt, right? Malt is something which can be get by the barley, or it is inside the cereals. And the another one is water. Yes, we need water. Then hops, sugar, yeast, and finings. Right. So here are some pictures. This is malted barley, right? Those who are new to the class. Okay. So these are the barley, even germinated barley, and the whole process is called a germination or malting process, when we need to soak the barley and spread on a floor for the moisture, like, and in a moist temperature, these sprouts will come out from the barley. That process is called as germination, right? And another ingredient is water, and third one is hops, and we'll discuss about like what is the major purpose of this thing. You just see the picture of the hops, and then sugar, and the next one is fining. We will discuss of this part also, and it is quite important thing. And then we will move further. So we'll discuss one by one. So malt is a basic ingredient. Malt is obtained from cereals, and this is the thing we have already discussed actually, and but I want a revision lecture. So barley is the best, and like mostly 80% of beer used to be produced by barley itself. And then water is also very important ingredient, because like we need water from the very beginning, because once we harvested the barley, we need to soak it, right? So naturally, if we are talking about soaking the barley, then we need water, right? And the major component of beer is water. Then the character of beer, yes, major thing is uh, what kind of water we are using, and it is directly proportional to the quality of beer we are producing, right? So water must be in a good, uh, we can say that it must have a very good um, content, right? The value, right? And one thing that I want to ask from you, can anyone tell me like any mineral water bottle, any mineral water bottle that you know?
Kindly.
Okay.
Bisleri.
Anyone else?
Bisleri, sir.
Really? Okay. Sanjeev Kumar.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this would be a small assignment for you. We will discuss in the next lecture, my dear. The first person said Kinley and Bisleri, right? Students, these are not the mineral water. And assignment would be you have to buy the bottle, or you can Google it. And like if I would say, if you will buy the bottle, then you'll get more clarity, because you need to check the label of the bottle. There would be clearly mentioned that this is the drinking water. Drinking water mean to say a filtered water, not the mineral water. Drinking or filtered water mean to say the major thing is they collected the water in a plant, and then they filtered that water, and they packaged, they bottled, and they send it for a sale. But the mineral water is something different. It does not like the price of mineral water used to be little higher than the normal filtered water, right? So in the next lecture, you all need to check what kind of mineral waters are present in the market. Kinley is not a mineral water, and this is major thing that I should tell you. But you have to tell me what type of bottles and what, like, under which brand they are in the market, right? Okay. So mineral water, like if you want to know about what kind of mineral water is, like which type of water we used to call mineral water, something which comes from hills, mountains, and the water is coming from little high, right? Or height, and the water is touching the, like, so many stones, so many plants, and the minerals are getting absorbed by the water. That water being collected by some companies, and they bottled, they packed that water, right? And the normal water, the Kinley and other drinking or filtered water, they collected any water and they filtered through some like we can say that mechanism, then they bottled that water. So there is a huge difference between mineral and filtered water, right? So the point of the discussion was that if we are using mineral water, then the beer quality would be different. If we are using filtered water, the quality would be different. And the major thing to check, we are drinking mineral or filtered water, and you can take example of your RO, which is at your home. It gives you a bitter taste, right? But the mineral water is something which will not give you a bitter taste, right? It will not give you any taste actually. Okay, so next thing is, so many brewery, they have their own wells and springs, right? Now we talk about the hops. Hops are something which is like the best hops are to be produced in Kent, which is in England. And this is the scientific name of the hops, Humulus lupulus, right? And this is very important thing. The word that I've put in like capital forms, right, or in bold form, they are important terms. So I would suggest that please write down these words. Okay. It gives bitterness to the beer. Like the bitter taste comes from the this particular thing, which is hops, and the flavor, it gives flavor, aroma, and the dryness, right? So these four things comes from this particular thing, which is hops. And next is antiseptic quality. Yes, so beer has some antiseptic quality also because it contains hops. And let's check what I apologize. I think I don't know like how this Zoom call get crashed. So let me start again. Here. So hops can also remove the sediments. Sediments mean to say the unwanted particles that comes during the soaking process, the malting process, or the sediments that comes during the roasting process, right? So hops can remove these sediments also, the unwanted particles, right? And it improves the shelf life. Shelf life mean to say like how many days the beer can be stored or preserved, or like it will be like it will be the, we can say that consumable form, right? So shelf life mean to say this thing, that how long that particular thing can be preserved. So now sugar again, it is also a major ingredient because we we all need like to add yeast, and yeast is something which reacts with sugar. Then only we can get alcohol. If there is no sugar in the content, then we cannot convert or we cannot get the alcohol. And one more important thing what sugar does, that it fasten up the fermentation, right? Because the major food of yeast is sugar, and if we add sugar, then it it speed up the fermentation process. It reduce the bitterness that comes from the hops, or if for an example that your barley is being roasted a lot, and now they are going to give better taste, more better taste. So to reduce that particular taste, we need to add sugar. Right? To give color, yes, in the form of caramel, because sugar is something which can be converted into caramel by heating up, right? So if we add caramel into beer, then it will give a good color, right? Because secondary fermentation mean to say the second fermentation in the bottle itself or in the kegs. Now yeast. So yeast again, it is required to produce alcohol because this is the main thing that we are going to produce, which is alcohol. So if yeast will not be there, then no alcohol will be there. And next is, let's check types of so mean to say like during fermentation, yeast gets multiplied, and the production persons, they used to collect the extra yeast and they use it for the time to come, right? And there are two types of yeast that we use: Saccharomyces cerevisiae and Saccharomyces cals. So these two types of yeast we are using to produce, or we are required to use to produce beer. So finding are those agents that that brighten the beer. Right? the clear liquid, or because sometimes what happens during the fermentation, beer gets into some foggy nature, right? The person cannot see the other side of the, we can say that, the bottle. So to reduce that fogginess, we need this particular process, which is known as fines, right? And to clear the beer, to give a brighten texture, right? So the major ingredient we use in this process is isinglass. So isinglass is what it is. It is a air bladder of various fish. A special fish is sturgeon. Sturgeon is a special breed of a fish, right? The name of the particular breed is sturgeon, right? And the bladder, we need to use that bladder, and the name given to the bladder is isinglass. It attracts all sediments that are left over during the roasting process, during the fermentation process, right? The sediments are settled bottom, in the bottom, and then we put isinglass into it. It gets attracted. The sediments get attracted to the isinglass, and then they remove the isinglass. By this way, like, the result would be a bright beer and a clear beer. Right, so here are the picture of isinglass, and this is the sturgeon fish, right? So we are moving towards the another slide. The malting process, we have started the production process of beer. So here are some points that we will be covering in the production process. The first is, I would say that just pay attention from the left hand side of the screen with the word malting, right? And after malting, there would be process brewing, then hop back, cooling and pitching, then fermentation. After fermentation, like, we will be moving towards maturation or maturing process, then brightening, packaging, cast. Packagings can be in three ways. Like, packaging can be done in casks, kegs, and bottles. There is another thing also, which is can. So we will learn what is cask and what is kegs, bottle, can, and all, right? So next thing is malting. Like, we will be starting with this process. The first step, in which we convert the starch into soluble sugar, right? I'm keep on saying one thing, that barley does not contain direct sugar, so we need to convert, because barley contains starch, so we need to convert starch into sugar, so that yeast can react upon. So we are required to soak the barley for 3 days, so that germination process can be started by spreading on a floor, right? So after soaking for 3 days, the barley is required to spread on a floor, so that germination process can be started. And to start the germination process, the temperature must be we can say that the atmosphere must have some moisture, warmth, and oxygen. So these are the three things that are required for the germination process. Next is after germination. So I would say over here that the words that are written in bold letters or in different color. So just pay attention to these words and try to write somewhere, because these are important terms. So germination, after germination, the barley used to call green malt, right? So there would be a term given to the germinated barley, which is green malt. Stop germination. Now the next process is germination. Like, we need to stop the germination process. Otherwise, what will happen? Like, the sprouts will coming out, and like, it will make the barley not convenient for the beer production, right? So we are required to stop the germination. So to stop the germination, we need the opposite thing to moisture or warmth. So the opposite thing is we need to dry it, or we need to uh, put into the direct heat, or we need to raise the temperature so that germination process can be stopped, right? So, and there is a word, just pay attention to the word. I'm going to read the last line: stop germination. Green malt is dried and roasted in a kiln to stop germination. So kiln is a special mechanism to roast the things, right? I'll try that. I'll show you the picture of kiln. It is a special mechanism in which direct heat used to be spread on the thing, especially on barley, so that germination process can be stopped, right? And after, there is a mistake, a typo. There is, we are required to use kilning, right? After kilning, the dried germination. Now the dried germination will be sent to the next process in which it will be grounded, and that powder is used to be called as grist, right? I'm repeating. Now what has happened earlier, the malt, the barley was little soggy, right? And the moisture was there in the barley. Now the total moisture has been removed, right? Because we have undergone the roasted process. Now it is ready to ground, right? We are now the step would be known as, like, we can say that milling, right? Or grounding the roasted barley. And now the powdered barley would be known as grist. So next step is brewing. So we have grist. So grist is to be sent to mash tun, where hot water has to be added so that the soluble sugar can be produced. Now we have grist, and the grist is hot water is required to add into grist. Next process, the process is called as mashing, right? So in like if this mashing process, or this particular thing is being asked in the question paper, then you are required to answer like this. The mashing process is something when we use hot water, or when we add hot water into grounded barley or grist. So the next point is mash. Mash is heated for few hours. Like they used to boil this particular mixture, grist and hot water. They used to, it is required to heat it up for few hours, and then what happens in the soluble material in the grist, so that the sugar can get extracted from, the whole sugar can get extracted from the grist, and the temperature is 65 degrees Celsius. So after the process, the liquid is called as oat. Now we are required to pay attention on oat. Now our final result, or the workable result, is known as oat, then dried hops. Now this is the time that we are required to add hops. So hops and sugar will be added over here. So we know that hops used to give a bitter taste, flavor, aroma, right? And sugar, what sugar does, sugar fasten up the fermentation process, or if the bitterness is little high, then sugar will reduce the bitterness. Now the oat is required to boil for 102 hours, right? So the oat, again, grist was the ground barley. We added hot water. We kept for for few hours, heating up the mixture of grist and hot water on a special temperature 65 degrees Celsius. Then after this process, that liquid is called as oat. Adding of sugar and hops is required over here. Then the next process would be, like you can see the picture. This is the picture of malted barley, right? And like you can see the picture, the big container in which barley is getting soaked. So after soaking or during soaking, the barley will look like this, spreading on floor. This picture says that this is the way how barley, after soaking, barley used to spread on floor like this. And then what next? Okay, hop back. So anything that you want to ask right now? Okay, so that hop back step contains, in this particular step, we used to remove the hop, because we know that the hop is something, a cone type of flour, and it is required to give a better taste, and as well as it gives the it removes the sediments also, right? So we require to remove that hop, so that required like after getting the required bitterness, or after extracting the required bitterness from the hop, we are required to take it back. And the used hop is sent for the agriculture purposes. Okay. And next is fermentation. See the picture of fermentation, like see the gallon, the size of the containers in which fermentation is going on, because our next step is fermentation. As of now, we have not uh, done the fermentation process. We have these 3-4 steps are just required for the to convert the starch into soluble sugar, so that fermentation can be started. So this is the an important step. After that, alcohol will be produced. So see the containers, and in this step they add yeast into it, so that fermentation process can be started. And this is a small picture on the right hand side. Like during fermentation, these steps or the liquid will be look like this. The yellow part which is on the over the liquid, you can see the yellow part, that is the yeast, and that used to be collected for next purposes. This is like, as we have discussed earlier, that yeast during fermentation, yeast gets multiplied, and the production person, they used to collect the extra yeast or multiplied yeast, so that it can be used in the next process. All right, anything that you want to ask till now?
यस सर।
Yes.
सर आपने थोड़ी देर पहले कहा था कि 65 डिग्री पे ही उसको बॉईल करना है। 65 सेल्सियस पे सर, अगर उसका टेम्परेचर बढ़ जाता है या फिर कम हो जाता है तो फिर?
नहीं, 65 पर what happens actually, we are not required to boil it, right? If you see the sentence, we need to heat up the mixture, right? Just pay attention on the third step, that we are required to heat up the mixture on special or specific temperature, which is 65 degrees Celsius. So if continuously your heating temperature has to be on a specific degree, which is 65, and constantly we need to do this thing. And if it is rising, if the temperature inside the content, it gets right, the content or the temperature is getting, we can say that, raised, right? So we are nothing to do, because but the major thing we need to pay attention on, the temperature we are the exact temperature of the machine, or the, we can say that the mechanism that you are using, that your temperature has to be 65 degrees Celsius. It is quite similar to the oven. Whenever we used to cook a cake, we need to set the temperature at 180 degree, 200 degree, right? We have set the temperature at this particular specific temperatures, and because we are not paying attention to the temperature inside the cake, but because we have already set the temperature of oven. So similarly, over here we are required to pay attention on the heating, direct heat, not the like the temperature inside the content. Getting my point?
Yes, sir.
We all need to pay attention on the temperature that we are putting, or we are making the, we are setting for the this content or this mixture. Like in simple word, else.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, Safraja.
सर फर्स्ट हम लोग उसको बॉयल कर मतलब आराम से बॉयल नहीं कर रहे हैं बिकॉज उसका शुगर मतलब एक्सट्रैक्ट करना है सर, इसीलिए ना।
करेक्ट, शुगर एक्सट्रैक्ट करना।
तो सर शुगर हम लोग एक्सट्रैक्ट कर रहे हैं सर।
यस,
मतलब प्रीवियसली हम लोग शुगर एक्सट्रैक्ट कर रहे हैं और फर्दर फिर से शुगर ऐड कर रहे हैं, तो सर इसका क्या कॉन्सेप्ट है?
दिस इज द मेन थिंग दैट वी हैव डिस्कस्ड इन previous slides. Okay, let me open up that slide. Okay. Just give me a moment. I'm opening up the slide. Yes. So see the third last point that we had, like we over here we are adding hops as well as sugar, right? Now the major thing to pay attention on hops, just see the qualities of hops. Hop used to do, or hop used to give a bitter taste, one, and it gives a flavor, it gives aroma, right? Sometimes to give a balanced taste, to give not to give a like more bitterness, or to balance the bitterness, we are required to add sugar. Getting my point? Because
Yes,
the
sir.
sugar that we have extracted, it is not a direct sugar, right? It is a soluble sugar. Even though, like, what will happen, then we are bound to use some content which must have sugar into it in any form, like in soluble sugar or the direct sugar, right? So if we do not have the direct sugar, then we are required to undergo the brewing process so that we can convert the starch into soluble sugar. And to reduce the bitterness, we are required to use some artificial sugar. To fasten up the fermentation process, we need to add some sugar. Even sometime to give, like people used to add caramel also. This is what we have learned in earlier slides, that some people do not add the direct sugar. They caramelize the sugar and then they add into the liquid. And it is required to give color also, right? So now I'll start the another slide, another PPT. So this is the, like, these are the steps we are required to use for the production of beer. So we were on the hop back, right? Cooling and pitching. Cooling and pitching mean to say that we are, because during hop back, or by the moment we were adding hops, the temperature was very high, right? Because we just received the wood after, like we boiled the grist once we added hops. Now the temperature is quite high, so we are required to cool it down, and then fermentation will be started. So fermentation can be started by adding two types of yeast, Saccharomyces cerevisiae and Saccharomyces callsburgensis. And then after fermentation, we will move on to the maturing process. So maturing process means to say we are required to settle down the content in by adding into or by placing the whole liquid in big containers, especially in wood containers, right? That wood used to be prepared by, or the container, the cask or barrel. These are the different names of that container: barrel one, cask one. So people used to add the fermented liquid into barrels to get it matured. Matured mean to say they keep the liquid for some time so that the second fermentation can be placed, or the color can be raised, right? Because what happens, oak uh, releases the color, the oak wood, that oak wood releases the color into the alcohol, and then brightening, because we know that during fermentation or during the roasting process, the beer gets, what do you say, the beer gets foggy in nature. So we need to give a brighten or clear texture. This process would be there fining, right? We add icing glass into it so that sediments get attracted to the icing glass, and then it will give a clear and bright texture. And then packaging can be done in casks, kegs, bottles, right? Okay, so after that we will be moving towards the service of beer. Let me show you a video if I would uh, let me try if I can show.
Yes, sir.
So you will be able to see the brewing process, right, in a 3D form, the brewing process, and then the whole, like the other things, how we used to add hops and the fermentation process and the packaging, right? So just see.
Produced. Barley or wheat grains are soaked in water in order to make them sprout. This induces the formation of enzymes. Subsequently, the grain is carefully roasted. The resulting malt is stored inside
So student, this is the point that we were like we have discussed in these slides. So in this big container, what is happening, this container is used to call as mash tun, in which we have added ground barley and we added hot water, let it go for 65 degrees Celsius temperature, and then keep heating, right? So this process is what, this is the main thing. And in which what happens, the soluble sugar can be uh, released by the starch. And next,
is now purified in the lauter tun, which separates the liquid from the grain. Slowly, the brew is filtered through a bed of malt grist at the bottom of the tun and run through a sieve further down. Rotating blades or knives in the lauter tun provide a good flow of the liquid by cutting through the grist. Containing the dissolved extracts is called wort. Water is continually added to further extract any remaining ingredients. This resulting original wort is the key to the taste of beer. Spent grain The solid residues of the brewing process, consisting mainly of grain, sprout shells, as well as insoluble proteins, can still be used. It serves as a high-quality feed in cattle farm.
Okay, so what have you seen over here? That the last container, the revolving container, was something which produced wood, right? That process was producing wood, and the mechanism is so good, it by default or automatically it strained the liquid, like it separates uh, the we can say that the content of grist and the liquid, it by default, like automatically it gets separated both the things. And the grounded one used to be used for the agriculture purposes, and they have taken uh, the leftover material over here in the agriculture fields, and they people use the beer production house people use the liquid only, which is known as boat.
To increase the milk yield of cows. This stage, hops are added to the liquid wort, which is then boiled.
Now they have added
up to 2 hours,
hops.
more than 80 degrees Celsius. Its taste and shelf life.
And the liquid, you can see the clear liquid because the ground barley has been removed and they have sent it to the agriculture fields, and this is the clear liquid, kind of clear liquid, and they have added hops into it.
The amount and type of hops used. The choice of hops used is a key element of the brewing process, as the variety chosen, as well as its area of cultivation, significantly. Hops added by the brewer, the more bitter the finished beer becomes. The amount of hops added ranges between 18 and 40 milligrams per liter. After boiling,
So they have given a figure that 18 to 40 milligram, or we can say that this much hops are required for 1 liter of wood. So in 1 liter wood, we are required to add 18 to 40 milligram.
wort is pumped rapidly into the so-called whirlpool. The residues of hops and proteins sink to the center of the kettle, forming a cone. This way, the solid particles are separated from the wort. Using a plate heat exchanger, the hot wort is cooled to the so-called ferment. Wort enters the cooler from the side and flows through.
So this process is cooling and pitching. The redness is saying or depicting that the water or the liquid, the wood is quite high in temperature. Now this process is required to cool down the temperature, which is cooling and pitching.
Profiled plates, which are cooled internally by iced water entering from the other side. The heat extracted during the process can be reutilized for brewing. The cooled wort is filled into the fermentation tank where yeast is added.
So these are the fermentation vessels.
The required temperature for the wort ranges from 5 to 20 degrees Celsius.
Okay, see the temperature 20 degrees Celsius is required for the fermentation process. These big vessels, casks, these are the containers in which fermentation will take place, right? The cold wort has to be transferred into these vessels so that fermentation can be started, and the temperature required is 20 degrees Celsius.
According to the type of beer he wants to produce, the brewer uses either top fermenting or bottom fermenting yeast. Top fermenting.
So this is the example, like there are two types of beer that we have or we will be studying. The top fermented and the bottom fermented. Top fermented mean to say the yeast will settle upside or on the top layer of the wood, like this way. You can see the picture. The fermentation is taking place top of the liquid, right? So this particular thing is called as top fermented beer, right? I'm repeating this, like there are two types of yeast, two type of beer: top fermented beers and bottom fermented. Top fermented mean to say if we add yeast and the fermentation takes place on the top level of the wood, like in this picture. and then it will be considered as top fermented beer. If yeast is settled down in the bottom and the fermentation is starting, or like fermentation is going play, or um, we can say that the fermentation process is going from bottom to up, then it would be considered as bottom fermented beer.
Yeast used ales, dark beers, and wheat beers forms flux during fermentation, which rise due to carbonic acid, leaving foam on the surface of the beer. This process requires warmer temperatures. Bottom fermenting yeast
Yeah.
is lowered.
See, this is something bottom fermented, because the fermentation, the previous picture, the fermentation was taking place in the top, and now see the things that are going down.
Does not fill but sinks to the bottom. This is used to make pills, malt, and
See,
lager.
the fermentation is
Yeast
taking
converts
place
the malt
beneath
sugar
the
to
liquid,
carbonic acid.
and you can see the color also. The color of this particular vote is different. The beer will be different in color if it is bottom fermented. So the color of beer will be different if it is top fermented, right? So see the white texture underneath, which depicts that this is bottom fermented beer.
Alcohol. This process is completed. It is removed. The young beer is ready. Storage tanks. The secondary fermentation process continues where the remaining sugar is converted into alcohol. Taste is refined and carbonic acid is bound. The remaining yeast and protein sinks to the bottom. Depending on the type of beer required, the young beer stays in the storage tanks for up to 3 months.
Yeah, see, like now the fermentation is over. They have sent the, like the content is ready to send for the maturation process for 3 months, right? So both the beers, both the type of beers will be sent for the maturation process.
By using Kieselguhr filters, yeast and other undesired sediments are removed. Subsequently,
During this process, sediments will be
pasteurizing are
removed.
heated. A plate and frame filter press can be used, whereby the beer is slowly pressed through individual layers of cellulose filters.
These are the filters that will remove the sediments.
Such as this. Finally, the beer is filled into various containers.
These are the container. Now the packaging process has been started. This particular container was known as kegs.
Brewers and consumers are very proud of their brewing tradition. For generations, beer has maintained its leading position as Germany's favorite
Okay,
alcohol.
so this like whole building or the production house of beer is known as brewery, right? The word which is given to this particular production house is brewery.
Frank,
Okay, so what have you learned in this picture or in this video? Can anyone tell me, like there are two types of beer you are able to see on your screen, the dark color beer and the light one. Can anyone tell me the dark one is which type of beer, top fermented or bottom?
So top fermented, dark one is top
The dark
fermented.
one is top fermented, yes. And the name given to the top fermented is ale, and the name given to the bottom fermented is lager. We will discuss in the next slides also. Top fermented mean to say the yeast is reacting upside the wood on the top layer, right? And the bottom mean to say that yeast has been settled down underneath or beneath the wood, and it is reacting or the fermentation is taking place from downside to upside, and the color would be different, even taste would be different. This is the main texture or main things. So the top fermented mean to say the name given to the top fermented beer says ale, 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 and the bottom mean to say that name given to bottom. Fermented beer, lager, Lager, lager. So we will discuss in brief. So was it a productive video?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's good. So in short, if we talk about that, making beer is not a big thing, but yes, the important things are the ingredients that we are using, which type of ingredients they are, or the nature, the content, right, and the temperature, and the other thing would be the time for specific things. There is a special time decided, or the standard has been set, like soaking time has is already set, and then the temperature is set. So these are the things that are required attention from our side or the production person, so that we can get a good quality of beer. So in short, if like in a crux way, I would say that beer is something which is produced by barley. Barley does not contain direct sugar. We need to undergo the brewing process because it does not contain direct sugar. So we, in brewing process, we need to break the starch and convert into soluble sugar. One word, right? And the other thing is, after like converting the starch into soluble sugar, now it is ready for the fermentation process. But before fermentation, we will add hops and sugar, right? Hops are required because hops give a better taste. It has the antiseptic quality. It gives aroma, flavor, right? And sugar fasten up the fermentation. So after fermentation, or during the fermentation, the temperature should be 20 degrees Celsius. And after that, the next step would be maturation, right? Or before fermentation, a cooling and pitching was also there. So cooling and pitching, fermentation, maturation, right? And then packaging. So these are the steps to produce a beer. I hope it is clear.
Yes,
Students,
sir.
right. So I'm switching on the, I'm going to launch the polls, right? So quickly answer these questions. Okay, there are 5 questions. Just answer quickly. So beer is something which is produced by dash. Now I want the correct answer. Students, start giving the answers. As no one has started yet. Okay. Just pay attention to these, like, okay, students, beer is not produced by grapes, please. There is something which is produced by barley. Like we are doing this particular thing from last 3 lectures, and still you are clicking on the grapes. This is not a good thing. Ale, just pay attention to the second question. third, broad beer. Broad beer, like we will have a brief lecture on this thing. The name of the broad beer is draft. I would give you answer that the uh, the another name of broad beer is draft beer, not the can beer. Fourth question, regular size of the regular size of beer bottle. Again, this is like you are required to pay attention. 21, 10 students are left. You have to be quick, students. It's 25 still. 6 students are left. Okay. Be quick. Be quick, students. 5 students are still pending. And you are required to click on any choice. Just answer these things. Still 4 students are pending. Quickly, students, I will wait only half minute. Okay. I'm going to close this one. So in the next class, there are 2 things that I've given you to come up. The first one is you will tell me the names of the brand names of the mineral water bottles that are present in the market. One. And the third one is the second point that you will be required to tell me the size of pint. Like people over here, I would not tell you right now. I would say that you just Google it, you just try to search that what is the actual size of a pint, right? And then definitely you'll get something and you will never forget. The things that you search by yourself, you never forget, right? And we will discuss the same point, same like we'll start with these two questions, the size of a pint and the brand names of bottle, mineral water bottles, right? And if Akshat is present, Akshat, are you present? Akshat is not present, I think. Okay, Arshdeep Singh.
Yes, good morning, sir.
Okay, good morning, Arshdeep. Just have a screenshot, like just take a screenshot and send it to me.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you so much, students, right, for being such a great audience, I would say, and start asking questions. Like, I appreciate the person who used to ask the question, and you can only like you will be able to ask the question if you write down the content, right? Okay, we'll meet in the next class. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Sir.
sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.